Prachi is a senior director at Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. And obviously does a lot of work in education, livelihoods. But I think I want to share a little bit of a personal intro for Prachi. I think one thing that MSDF has done incredibly well over the last decade is really making headway into the state level transformation work within education. So I think a huge topic, Prachi, that I'm just hinting if you could touch on in some way or another today while we have you. The second thing I'll say about Prachi is I think for about a decade now, I've personally hounded Prachi. I found her, I've cold messaged her on LinkedIn at one point, found her at a conference in Dubai, hounded her at her office in MSDF. And the reason I say that, I think she's been someone who I've personally gone to a lot, to thought partner, to ask about, hey, what's happening? And I think every new role that I've taken up probably has started with me going to Prachi and saying, Acha, what's happening in this sector? Give me some 2-3 tips. And ACT was no different. I think my journey here also started with going to you and saying, tell me about EdTech, everything you know. So Prachi, couldn't think of a better person to anchor this first roundtable. And with that, I will hand it over to you.
Awesome, Akanksha. I hope I can match your energy in the first half and then this very kind introduction. But thank you for setting this up. Thanks for all of you who are here to have this collective action towards catalyzing social impact at scale. And I really hope that we get this dialogue doing, even though few of us are a few feet higher than the rest of us. But I really hope that all of you will engage in this conversation and dialogue as we proceed. I have a lovely panel. I have Lathika, who heads Microsoft PE and VC. She also heads the entrepreneurship for positive impact initiatives over there, and it's a very interesting program on a blended way, in the way that we spoke about this morning, that there are different types of capital needed. And I thought that Lathika will bring in that very interesting perspective. We have Mahesh, of course, from Acumen. He leads Acumen in India. Acumen, most of us who know impact investing, invented almost impact investing globally. And even in India, the work has been very impactful. So I look forward to hearing more from Mahesh. And of course, we have our two very bright entrepreneurs. Supriya, she set up and co-founded Josh Talks, which is a motivational talks platform, but has extended into Josh Skills and many things wonderful. And if you have high school kids, your kids would have already been hounding this app called Doubtnut, and I often come back to Tanushree and complain and explain about it both. But Tanushree is the founder of Doubtnut, which in my personal experience, whenever I go to schools, whenever I visit children, I always ask them, which is your killer app? What are you using on EdTech these days? There are two killer apps. One is YouTube, the other is Doubtnut. So it's amazing to have all four of you. So what I'll do is I'll run the session in 3 themes. The first theme is just defining impact. What is our organization's mission? What is the impact that we are driving? How do we measure it? So let's just, we'll start with that theme. The second theme I want to come to is that what are we doing differently in our respective organization to achieve that impact? And in order to make it action-oriented, the third thing that I want to do is to ask each one of my panelists that, what is it that they want to do more of? What is it that they wish was different? What do they need from this collective room, from the ecosystem, to be able to achieve number 1, which is their mission for impact? And what I'll do is, after each theme, I will pause and I will pose a question. You have to listen to the question and share your response to that question. And we'll have time for your questions at the end. But for the first 3 themes, just bear with me and listen to what the speakers here are saying and to the question, and then let's just keep it interactive that way. Sounds good? Awesome. So we are ready to roll. So I'll start with that question. I'll start with you, Lathika. What's the mission or the impact that you're looking to drive in your role here at Microsoft? What really is the impact that you're driving for, and how do you measure it?
So thank you, Prachi. And more importantly, I must say I'm super excited to be here. ACT was started in 2020. I think we all in the room underestimate the power of this platform. It has some of the best and brightest minds, and most importantly, everybody here with a common cause in terms of looking, in terms of scaling, whatever the work is, right, in terms of the startups that we're working with. This is similar to what we are trying to do at Microsoft with a passion, right? And there we have the global head for entrepreneurship for positive impact is led by Jean-Philippe Courtois, who used to be, the number 2 after Satya. He stepped down from his role from sales and marketing only because he believed that technology must be used to scale for positive impact. What we mean by that is that how do we empower startups, like Doubtnut, Josh Talks, the Forest one that we saw, in healthcare, in leveraging technology, because technology is the only way that will take you to the millions, to the billions potentially in helping out. In terms of what we have done and what we have seen is that that there are some amazing entrepreneurs out there who just need the help in terms of scaling. And what we also believe as an organization, that Microsoft is all over the planet, right? Literally in every part of the world. So how do we take solutions, for example, that are created in India to different parts of the world? That is really the focus of EFPI, which is technology and helping in GTM in going, taking it forward. Of course, with OpenAI and ChatGPT, we've now become the coolest kids in the block. I think people who didn't want to talk to me now, everybody is willing to talk to me. But on a lighter note, I was, while people were talking about ACT, so I asked Bing Chat saying, how is ACT perceived? So the response was, from a human perspective, they are doing extremely well and the intent is phenomenal, right? But it is a subjective opinion. So please do your own due diligence, right? So the caveat was there. So I think that really, to sum it up, it's absolutely a phenomenal platform. I think we've just scratched tip of the iceberg, and we are here as Microsoft to help each one of you, whether you're for profit, social impact, or NGO, to use technology to scale.
And are there any specific sectors within that, Lathika, that you prioritize the use of technology in?
Right now, deep focus is on sustainability. I think Microsoft has already said by 2030 will be climate. We would be carbon neutral. I think it's very, very important. So we're working with the startups in the sustainability space. However, healthcare, education is also and agriculture, right? So these are the 4 areas of focus that we do have at a global level, and any solutions made in India, we believe, are capable of scaling globally, and that's what we want to do, is help take these solutions to different parts of the world.
So the impact that you're driving for is ensuring that through technology, some of these sectors are able to scale, and organizations which are working in those areas. But coming back to how do you measure whether that has actually happened? Do you stay with them for a period of time and see whether they achieve a certain scale or a certain efficiency? Or how do you actually see that technology has brought them, the before and after of the use of technology?
So we don't stay with them for a certain time. We want to stay with them as for, while they continue to scale, right? They need the support early stage. I'll take an example, FluxGen. FluxGen manages water. And when Ganesh came to us as part of Project Amplify, or 2 years ago, they were really looking at help in terms of how do they have a platform that can leverage our IoT devices, edge computing, etc., in terms of all the monitoring. Today, they are with 50 plus clients, and in terms of all the large clients, saving almost 300 million liters of water a month. So for us to be able to get them from 300 million to 3 billion to 30 billion, right, is something that we are there throughout that journey. So we actually measure the success of the impact to see if we have helped them scale on multiple fronts, right? Both in terms of making it sustainable, profitable business, making sure that they get access to customers that would have probably taken them months and even years to connect with, and more importantly, giving the platform to leverage to say you are a Microsoft partner.
Thank you. Supriya? Finally. So would you like to define, we heard from Shobhit, but we heard from Shobhit primarily about the English apps, and I know Josh Talks and Josh Skills has a much bigger mandate than that. Do you want to talk about, what is at the core of impact that you as an organization stand for, and how are you measuring it in your work?
I think for us, the definition of impact has also evolved. I think impact for us was a feeling for the first few years, which was that when we were just on YouTube, what type of comments are coming? Are people actually taking an action after watching a particular video? What does viewership look like? And over a period of time, it's now become about measurable outcome, right? And that shift came when we actually started working on a product that taught someone a particular skill. And then for us, it became important that are we just teaching English, or is this person learning English and there has been a transformation in their life as a result of that? So the metrics and the meaning of impact evolved a lot. But when we look at Josh as an organization, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to replicate the elder brother in someone's life, someone who's there, who guides you right from the time that you're 13 or 14 and you start making career decisions till the time that you start learning a particular skill, you get your first internship, you get your first job, you prepare for a particular exam, you upskill. So the whole idea is that can we be that, we call it Bade Bhaiya, you know that, Prachi, but can we be that Bade Bhaiya or Badi Didi in someone's life? And if they find that relationship truly nurturing, and if they say that to us, that is the true meaning of impact for us.
And as investors in Josh Talks, this has been an ongoing quest for us from the time we've met Josh Skills. That really, what is it that Josh Skills, Josh Talks does that leads to that Bade Bhaiya impact on the 30 million plus viewers that we have.
180 million plus viewers.
Million plus, okay. but really, what in, like, when you are there is a lot of this data coming at you, right? There are the comments which are coming at you. You're seeing how many repeat users you are getting. You're actually also now seeing some of the other motivational talks or talks of other successful aspirants or whatever it is. There are people who are actually seeing those talks and actually going and signing up for a course to meet their own career objective. So there are all of those indicators, but if you were to rank them and say that, when this is happening, I know I've played that role that Josh wanted to play in the lives of young people, what will be those top 2-3 metrics that you as the leadership team look at and say, yes, we're doing what we are setting up for?
So for YouTube or for the media side of Josh Talks, the only metric that we really care about is average watch time. A video that we put on the internet is between 12 to 20 minutes. And our goal is always to ensure that the watch time is 5.5 to 6.5 minutes, because we feel that that's enough for them to actually get that spark of Josh or drive to do something. As opposed to, platforms which are short video oriented, like even Instagram Reels, etc., where you're fighting that attention, but you're really not learning or taking back anything from what's being visible. So that's sort of the anchor metric. Luckily for us, average view duration also results in metrics like viewership changing. So then that's why it makes sense for us as a business to measure that. For skills, I think we've been kind of between two metrics that we really value. One is, of course, completion rate. How many people who are actually learning with us complete the course. And the second is average time spent per day speaking. So the entire app is based on the premise that you can connect with other people and speak to them in English about any particular topic, and we have prompts for that. And an average user right now is spending close to 52 minutes a day speaking. So that's very important, because our entire thesis is that if you spend an hour a day for 90 days straight speaking in English, you will become fluent and you will jump 2 levels of English according to our curriculum. So that's incredibly important for us to measure.
So engagement is a big metric for you, for we are doing something right, and therefore we are
engagement and completion.
Yes. Tanushree, moving to you, what would you say about how you measure your impact, and how do you even define your impact?
So Prachi, in our case, luckily for us, since the time we began, um, we 90% of the kids that were coming on our platform, even when it was an app on Play Store and not on YouTube, 90% of the kids that were coming from rural areas, and that was because we were being able to solve a very strong use case for the students. See, I think there have been multiple reports. In 2017, there was a Google KPMG study which said that doubt solving is the biggest challenge that a student has, whether they are studying online or offline. Even very recently, there was a report by CSF which said that about 60 to 70% kids, when they are using anything, they are using it for doubt solving. Now that doubt solving could be in multiple aspects. It could be just the question doubt solving, or it could be the fact that there's a topic that they did not understand in school, or a lot of people don't even end up going to school very well. How they ended up doing that doubt solving using multiple channels. So we took that specific use case and continued to go deep into it. We started with English, which meant that it was for English medium kids, but we chose the language of the video to be Hindi, which covered almost all the English medium kids, except maybe some kids who are going to international schools, who would probably want the video still to be in English. At least the North Indian belt was covered. Then we went down to the language pure Hindi, where a square is called a varg, a radius is called a trijya, trigonometry is called trigonometry, and we basically made we created video solutions for all the students for UP board, Bihar board, Rajasthan board, Jharkhand board, Chhattisgarh board. The idea was, I think for a lot of us who've studied in Delhi or who studied in CBSE schools, we assume the student to be that only. We are not able to look beyond that. So we kind of, went there. Now, in terms of measuring impact, one of the qualitative things that we do as a company, even today, is that we make, and I also make about 10 calls every day, and we make about 100 calls as an organization every day to the students who are coming into the platform and trying and understanding why they came, what is it that we are solving for, what are the current outstanding problems that they have, and that gives us a very good qualitative sense of where these students are from, what their parents do, what demographies they belong to. I mean, and I've shared these stories with Prachi because sometimes, these students are part-time job people who are preparing for JEE or NEET. See, I think it's still going to be very difficult for them to crack NEET or JEE because the number of hours that other students are being able to give is a lot more. But the fact that they can at least aspire to prepare for an exam because there are online solutions available. So why I said all of this is because, we've not had the need to say that, how many students are we being able to impact, because 85 to 90% students who are, and that is what India is. Like only about 15% students live in the tier 1 cities. So if there is a solution which is tech enabled and is being able to solve for the needs of the entire country, by definition, 85 to 90% kids will be from, rural, marginalized backgrounds, sons and daughters of labor, sons and daughters of farmers. So, and then, we do have one impact investor on our side, Umidya Network. So in that entire journey, we do a lot of third-party studies, and it does come out. I think one study that was done in 2019-20, there was this number that they were trying to see on how many or what percentage of population within the platform across their entire portfolio were people who had come online over the last, let's say, X number of years. I think at that point it was 1 year, 2 years. And for us, I mean, Doubtnut was the star in that, in their portfolio for that particular thing. So again, while we are not doing something extremely explicit to measure impact by saying that, but we have those numbers always at the back that, 85%, 60% of our students who are coming even for doubt solving are coming for pure Hindi medium doubt solving. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So one is that you're saying that just the fact that I'm reaching to kids who would not be addressed is itself impact. And then there are other studies in which you are also seeing whether or not they're staying long enough, their doubts are actually getting solved. And I know I get a lot of information from you on your league tables on how many kids have made it to which exam. So in education there is sometimes that obvious impact also on whether or not, at least in the competitive exams and board exams, the kids perform better. So Mahesh, when we start running a multi-sectoral fund, defining impact can become harder. But as Acumen, what do you do? How do you define impact? How do you then select companies which would have had, which would fit that thesis or not?
Yeah, I think I would start by saying that I think we go with the word patient capital. There's a lot of talk this morning about speed, and I want to say that we are attached to the word called patient capital, and we think that will guide us in the future. I think patient capital and impatient entrepreneurs is a combination. We think about leaders. Uh, and why patient capital? Because we are clear that we prioritize impact first. And obviously, there has to be returnability of the capital to make it sustainable. But that needs to be patient in the equation. That's our thing for backing companies at the early stage. So that's what we've been doing. And what we have found is that initially we started by not having any sectoral focus because we went wherever we think patient capital with impatient leaders can solve problems of poverty at scale. I think that's the thesis on which we are working. There's some shifts around that. So we went to everything and we learned a lot. I think one of the main things is that we can create markets where markets don't exist for the poor, for access to goods and services. And there's a phenomenal example of that we have, which is a company called Zikitsa. There used to be nothing called an ambulance service in the early 2000s. And this company started ambulance service with 7 ambulances and had a very interesting price discrimination model where if they were going to go to Breach Candy, the person will pay high. If they were going to go to the government hospital, they would pay nothing or very less. They were scaling at a certain level, but the pivot happened due to an unfortunate incident on 26/11 when there were all the ambulances going around Taj. They got noticed as a brand 1298 doing a lot of work, and state governments noticed them. And that led to a totally different model emerging, which is PPP. So our thing is that market can get created not necessarily because poor can pay, because that takes a long time, and you have to evolve other models. In this case, now the ambulance service across India, many states, is a PPP model where it's a B2G business. And this company pivoted, and it's a large company now, scaled, very profitable. So creating market is possible where it didn't exist. It doesn't have to be always by people paying. And we can talk about that because that's an ideal situation. But when we know that we are providing solutions, ready to see those pivots, I think that's one big learning. Second is also where markets are broken. How do you what are the models there? Again, a very interesting example. I want to talk examples rather than what we do. Again, is a company called Sitara, which is actually from the Seva staple. Seva staple, which actually provides housing loans not for first-time house, but for fixing broken houses and making the houses pakka. And this is actually a separate enterprise called Sitara. It's born out of Seva. It's a phenomenal example of giving loans to poor to rebuild their houses so that they can continue with their livelihood. It's scaled phenomenally. These are 2 good examples I can talk about. These are 2 places I've seen we've been able to stay patient with them, and they were created, I would call, markets. I'm also conscious to say things have not worked. In water, it's not worked. Yeah. We tried to do in water, it didn't work at all. So there has been an amazing set of journey on providing access to goods and services. I think the next phase for us, using the same core, is actually because of climate change and future of work. How is our demographic bulge? How is it going to be coping with that? Whether that is in the form of farmers or workers, and especially women in terms of participation. I think that's the area in which we are going in terms of what are the innovations which are required and what can be supported, and how can we make this patient capital more regenerative.
So there's a good common theme which is emerging across all of us, right? Like where there is a gap, and if I've been able to fill that gap is an impact that I've created, right? Whether that missing Bade Bhaiya, Bade Didi wasn't there, the solutions were not reaching the rural population, or markets didn't, like the solutions didn't exist, market creation role, or technology where it was needed is so finding a gap and filling that gap, and then measuring that how well I've been able to fill that gap. Maybe we'll take one quick example from anyone in the audience, a compelling example of what you think either of your own organization's impact, how you defined it, and how do you measure if you've achieved it. Sure. Very quickly, your name and organization and the impact?
We're trying to focus on depth, which is, we might be working with 10, 20 waste pickers, but trying to permanently lift them out of poverty in the long run. And that's a lot harder to do than to provide them a course or a lamp. And that sometimes to our detriment, like, oh, only 20 waste pickers, that's nothing, But no, wait, we're trying to change lives permanently, which takes years and decades. So I would love to ask the panel and just people in the room, like, how do you quantify depth versus just pure numbers? Because, especially for funders, because numbers are 100,000 attractive, but...
Let me open it up for broader conversations. I mean, right now, during the panel, I just want to get examples that speak to the same theme. So with that, I mean, let me just take your question back to what I was going to ask as the next question. That does capital, which is the theme for ACT Summit, like, different forms of capital, blended capital, impact capital, does capital actually incentivize impact, right? So what do we say and what do we do, Mahesh? And for Tanushree and Supriya, what have you seen differently? Because you have both types of investors on your cap tables, impact investors as well as commercial investors. So Mahesh, let me start with you. Do you think you have at Acumen a structure which will incentivize impact? And are there tough calls to be taken where at the end of the day, this is a sustainable, this has to be a profitable, fast growing venture that you're supporting. So how do you take that call, impact versus profitability? What is that journey?
I think it's a tough question. To say that this is straightforward and this is both is something we don't easily just say. I mean, one of the first things I really want to be open about is that we have, as I said, we have stressed on impact first. And that has meant that very openly I can talk with absolute openness and honesty that our returns are less than some of the other any impact investors. We don't even get classified in them because we don't get those kind of returns. However, we have seen that, very happy to say that after a long time we have seen this is bearing out. There are exits coming in some of these big companies now, which I'm talking about, because that kind of the market for exits for some of this is still broken. While there's a lot of money going in terms of investment, the exits are not yet there, other than still financial inclusion and MFIs and some sectors, as you would know. So I think that's the part which is there to balance. But if you really ask, I think it's about what your intention is. As a fund, as of what we do, we are clear if it is not having impact at the core, we don't invest. And over a period of time, things change. There are entrepreneurs who want to shift, not because they don't want to, because they want to do certain things which takes the business and takes them away. I think we are always conscious and aware, and we make those decisions along with them. And if it means that it is totally off the charts in terms of impact, if we have to come out, we'll come out. And that's what we do. But I don't think it's a matter of judgment, because at the end, the entrepreneur is building a venture and they have to take care of all the balances. And it's our call to take what we want to do. As far as we are concerned, we support like that. And we have found that we have found entrepreneurs who are very balanced. One of the best conversations I've had, I can quote here, is we had almost finalized an investment with one person. And the person came up and said that I can't do this to farmers anymore. I've got another funder who's saying, don't do to farmers, just do to the retailers. Are you ready to invest? Because I want to tell you upfront, I don't want to have you on the cap table and later have a problem that I'm not able to meet your needs. And I actually appreciated that, because that was an honesty to not just sell impact to us. And we didn't do that, but we have a great relationship because he moved in a different way. But I think that's what happens. But I don't see this all the time as a...
You don't see it as a conflict.
No, it's a conflict. I think you have to balance it. And to say that, okay, returns are possible, impact is possible as a standard, easy mantra, I think it's not. There are trade-offs which happen. Trade-offs happen because of the time it takes. I think eventually the capital has to circulate. We are not trying to say that it needs to go away. And it's not a grant capital. We are also doing investing. But the point is that the idea of a patient capital is it will get circulated, but it's not returning fast. And once you know that, how do you kind of structure yourself? That's what we do. We accompany for a long time.
Thank you. Thanks, Mahesh. Tanushree, you've had both. You've had both impact investors as well as commercial investors. You've also had a journey. So what have you seen is the difference, between having an impact investor and a commercial investor? And does it help a company more at a certain stage or in a certain way? What would you share as experience that others can learn from?
So we've been very lucky to have a great set of investors, Sumedia Networks, Sequoia, Waterbridge Ventures. Um, and one of them is impact. So now I think, and it's not so, at least from a financial return point of view, I didn't see a great difference in the way they operate. Meaning it wasn't like, one of them is saying that, we are ready to wait it out for years, etc. But what I do feel is that the speed or the growth, the level of growth that is required by a purely financial investor, such as a Sequoia or a Tiger or all of these investors, is much higher than maybe an impact investor. Now, it can be taken in both ways. I think when sometimes because we talked about how speed is important, and I think in our case it did help us a lot to have a very strong mix of impact and financial investors, because it let us grow from, let's say, when we were first institutionally funded, from 1,000 doubts to 100 million doubts a month, and 1,000 to, let's say, a journey of 450,000 was built in a year. So impact wouldn't have been possible if we were not operating at that speed, and that speed did need capital, and that capital would have come only if we grew. So basically, I think one of the things that somebody had said in an earlier panel is that technology is able to create impact at huge scale, and for us to attract the sort of people who would be required to build that technology, very different type of sometimes a financial vision also is required for us to kind of build in front of them. And that is why that mix was very important. Now, the other thing that I'm also seeing, Prachi, is that once you have some of these investors on your side, to take a path which is where we would want to attract more impact capital is not as easy, because a lot of times you get branded as a company which may, because you have some of these investors that may not be willing to invest themselves into impact as much as you would like. So by you are creating impact, but you are not necessarily being able to attract the impact capital because you've probably raised so much funds, you have a certain valuation, a lot of those things. So I would just so I think that is one of the most important things that I would just say, I think Mohit had mentioned that in pure venture investing, there's a seed investor that creates the top of the funnel, and then there's a growth capital that comes in. In companies that are creating impact alongside, maybe not returning funds for financial investors, like alone by themselves, at a stage where you need X million dollars, it is not, at the early stages, there are many investors, but at a different stage, it becomes difficult for you to attract capital.
Yeah. So what you're also saying, Tanushree, is that while there might be a lot of, which is true about impact investing, capital available at the early stage, but even as you're growing, and if you want to maintain that focus and grow in certain areas, it will also require follow-up capital to be coming from the impact rounds. And just for the audience, I mean, impact investing is a big sector in India. It's crossed $15 billion. In 2021 alone, it was $7 billion, 5.1 flowing into the sector. But still, the bulk of it goes to financial inclusion. 83% of it goes to financial inclusion. Climate is the other big sector. And then all of our, health, agri, education, all of them starts becoming slivers. And 85% of the deals over there happen in the early stage. So that's actually a really good point that you're raising. Let me move to you, Supriya, because you're using both types of, capital, right? You have the mainstream capital, you have, foundation type of impact investing, impact capital. But at the same time, you have a partnership with someone, say, like ACT, which is again another form of capital which has allowed you to do something very different. So how do you see as the roles being different or alike, and as an entrepreneur, how does it help you?
Sure. So I think I'll take the example of ACT over here. So for example, the reason that we went to ACT was that we wanted to develop a specific part of the app which was focused only on learning outcome and learning curriculum, moving from A2 to C1, which is, having foundationally 2 jumps across the learning cycle. At that time, we had already raised institutional capital and as well as impact capital, right? But what we felt was that money should be utilized for growth. because the business was already doing well. Fundamentally, we didn't need to solve for this to act business. People were satisfied with the app. They felt that they were learning. But for us as an organization, we felt that this wasn't adequate. We weren't completely satisfied with the fact that, it's okay for us to scale, more and more people will learn, but we are not able to actually solve for the fundamental problem of learning English while we are building a business. So that led us to, kind of inquire, and we found out about ACT or ACT at that time. And then the grant that we got for them, we used to build the learning pedagogy again. And we're still experimenting with that. So that's sort of how we've differentiated that, grants are there for 0 to 1, which is when we're trying to foundationally break something or learn fundamentals. And then even with an impact, we'll take equity when we're already at 1 and we go from 1 to 10. But I think in the overall space, 2 or 3 things that I've noticed. One is that if you're doing something for social impact or you're working in, education or financial inclusion, the first thing that people feel is that you're a not-for-profit. So, there is that barrier also that you have to break. We are not a not-for-profit, and there's nothing wrong with being a not-for-profit, but you can build a sustainable business around delivering value or impact to someone. So that's one. And the second thing is that as you continue to grow as an organization, the funnel of money and impact does reduce. So if we were to look at a Series B and we would look at, say $10 to $15 million, the quantum of money that we can actually get or the organizations that we can reach out to are very, very few within India at least. So that's, I think, the second problem. And then when you start working with an impact investor, you are leaning more towards metrics that are aligned with impact. And then not having impact capital in the next round means that you have to foundationally now change your way of thinking, become a traditional, business in the VC sense, change your metrics and get tuned. So it's almost like you're managing an ethical battle on a daily basis that in the future, I need to raise this kind of capital, so I need to move here. But at the same time, we want to create impact. We have impact investors, so we need to continue to deliver on that value proposition as well.
There's a great common theme of that, that there is not just at a certain stage that you need the impact capital, and you can't completely throw from one stage to the other because of the slightly different requirements from that capital that will come. But I think you also raised that very nice point about the use of grant capital almost in the R&D form, which the company might need at any stage and not just at the early stage, which is what the ACT grant did for you, because it's almost something which you've deployed in the development of a new product, which for a new type of a segment. So that's a really good example of the blending of capital. Lathika, your any examples you would like to share where you found that the support that you're providing was very unique in the role that it was playing in these organizations, and what a pure play commercial investor would not have been able to do it, or impact investor would not have been able to do, but you're providing a very different kind of a support, and that helped the organization.
Prachi, I'm going to first respond to the question that was asked, right? Saying that what do we do when we are working in depth with 10 to 20 versus investors looking at scale? The reality is that investors have an obligation to the people who have invested in the funds in terms of the returns that are being given back to them. And there are individuals, right, who are willing to use that, like Mahesh said, patient capital, to say instead of me getting a 80% return, I'm okay with getting a 20% return. And most of the time they're doing that because they do want it to be sustainable. When you're working with 10 to 20 and there is no scale, I think it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to raise any kind of funding. Will you be able to make an impact? Absolutely. Any impact is impact. If you have changed the lives of 20 people, that is phenomenal, right? You need to understand what is it that you're going after. And if you believe that you're going to find satisfaction and peace with 20 people, go for it. I think there are grants that are available for you to do it. Will there be funding? The answer is no. I think that is the reality, right? In terms of being able to find venture impact funding if you're not going to add multiple zeros after it. Secondly, I think a market like India is very, very difficult to find the right monetization strategy. You know, people are unwilling to pay. It is, and it's something that I think you will find 180 million views, great. How am I going to monetize it, right? Why is it that people don't see value? Why is it that people don't see value for education? I think to a great extent it's also been because of the fact that people have not necessarily had to pay for education. So it's great. On one hand, you'll find people willing to give capitation fees. On the other hand, for basic skills that we're talking about, they're unwilling to do it. So I think that is the challenge we face as a country in terms of finding how do people on the other end, the consumer, perceive value in terms of what they're getting, right? So I think to be able to crack it, it takes a long time in a country like India. So that's something that every impact entrepreneur is going to face. Most of the time, it has to be a combination of state, I would say, governmental projects that they work to, which they are, they have their own challenges in terms of working it out. So that's something that I wanted to mention is what we face. But absolutely, it's phenomenal to watch over the past 10 years the amount of money that is coming into impact, how it is helping in terms of moving the needle. From our perspective, it's very clearly about, like I mentioned earlier, that you need both technology and touch to scale, right? Without the technology, you're unable to scale. We have worked, for example, in the area of agriculture. We worked with a startup called Jal Jivika outside of close to Pune that works with aqua farmers, right? So aqua farming was something that they did. They came to us with the problem in terms of how do they really manage and monitor the pH values that are out there for the fish. How do we increase the amount of fish that each of these, there were about 500 farmers that we began with. So we had Microsoft Research coming in, working with the team in terms of saying, here is a technology that you need, that now you can scale from 500 to 5,000 to 50,000, right? So we believe that by giving that technology platform, that will help the entrepreneur to add those zeros that you're looking for. You're not going to be able to do it manually. You need technology to help you to add the zeros in terms of scaling. That's something that we are very passionately driving. Even in terms of, I met Sujay from ICure, who's also part of the Microsoft portfolio of startups. We've helped him in terms of, leveraging in terms of the amount of, the number of patients they can reach in different parts of the country, in terms of using the data that they get. It's a very large data play that is out there. How do you slice and dice the data in the right way to be able to then leverage it? We heard about the partnership that that ACT has forged in terms of AI being a common theme, in terms of being able to leverage, in terms of providing the intelligence and the support across the board, right? So technology is going to be the absolute, I would say, baseline that needs to be adopted to scale, and that will bring the funding in. I think that's really the reality, right? If you go to an investor and say that I want to be able to do this without technology, today it's going to be impossible.
So when you look at the way the impact, the overall social sector in India is evolving from a social problems that we are looking to solve, and you see the investor ecosystem for there, or the different forms of capital which are becoming available. Mahesh, what do you think we should do more of? What should we do differently in order to, meet our SDG goals, if I may say?
I think I'll take the liberty to use this word which was used in the ACT thing about venture philanthropy. I mean, our model, which was initially, was taking philanthropic capital and using investing as a tool. Still using investing as a tool, but the source is philanthropy. I think India is still a lot about binaries. It's this versus that. Oh, investment means it is left side, grant it is right side. Here I get return, here I have impact. It's all, even most of the family offices, many of the people who are able to fund, even investors amongst us, for them investment means, oh, that has to be about this, whereas it is this. I think these binaries don't help. I think the fact that we have genuinely seen with patient capital, of course, I'm honest to admit that it's taken a lot, but we have seen the bearing out. I think it does require ability to see that level of capital which is required at the edge, which is at the gap, which you need to, and it can be for growth. It will give the return back. It will not give like a VC return. It will not give like Silicon Valley, but it can be used using the same tools of market, same tools of VC principles, same tools of entrepreneurial economic system. It can work. I think leaving this binary is a great thing. I mean, I was very curious to see the word venture philanthropy because that's the kind of combination which comes together, and that's what we've been trying to say all along. That it's you need to leverage the philanthropy and then raise more capital, definitely on top. But how can they serve together to solve biggest problems? Because the capital required is much more. I don't think sitting in one bucket is helpful. I think that's our only thing actually.
On a more flippant side, I was just thinking to myself that if 25% of all the money that goes into the Tirupati Hundi could be brought here, right? The kind of impact we'll make is huge, you know. I think India as a country is baffling. For some reason, donations all go into religious. So if we can somehow, as a group, you know, talk to family offices, there's so much of capital available. How do we get that capital to prove to them that we are really moving the needle at the bottom of the pyramid, right? That is something that I don't know how we're going to crack the code. But personally, I honestly is, you know, you had Warren Buffett come in here with Bill and a bunch of others trying to get, so you had Mr. Premji, you know, sign up to it. I think really if there is a way that we can influence Indian industrialists to part with their money in terms of social causes, you know, make this act corpus 100x, right? That's how it's going to change. We absolutely have to have more capital put into this. I think it's a great initiative, at least that all the VCs came in to create this platform. I think from if I were to look at it in terms of saying how do we really change, is to go in and really try and get more into the corpus to do what we're trying to do today at that 100x number, or you know, 1000x number, so that we can support young and bright founders like Supriya and Tanushree and others in the audience.
I mean, there are other initiatives just like that. I think we have to be careful. I mean, just the great ones about Warren Buffett and all. We have Living My Promise. We have Giving Pi, JC sitting here.
Yeah.
So there are people who are doing that to get funding from a lot of people.
And
so it's
there is
happening
more
now.
happening
Yeah.
in terms of blending of capital. But yes, clearly we need more of. So what we'll do is we'll open it up for questions. If the organizers would be, can just circulate the mics around. We'll take 3 questions and then we can just have anyone in the panel who finds appropriate answer them.
Hi, I'm Arjun, an entrepreneur building a cooling and automation company out here in India. So I have a question about different type of capital. One, you know, we always hear about grants and equity and all of this stuff, but one thing that is, I think, requires even more capital is project finance, long-term capital. Not only debt, but you know, finance from large corporations or large other people who have a lot of money who can invest on long-term cash flows, which entrepreneurs can generate. I think there's a dearth of that capital. So any of you are focusing on that, and what do you think is the future of that kind of capital being more available to entrepreneurs?
Sure. Any other question?
When I see how the VC world evolved from 2002, I'm Loni Anthony from Hitachi Payments, also actively involved with ACT on a horizontal platform basis, building up the organization, compliance, governance, etc. So when I see from 2002 onwards how the VC world evolved, you know, there was a whole other ecosystem that came up, the venture debt space. Initially it was venture capitalists, then private equities, then buyout funds. There was in 20 years, a lot has happened. I can see that a similar kind of, and it's more of a comment saying that if ACT could come in, like Supriya said, you know, to 0 to 1 kind of situations in a grant form, co-invest along with impact capital, investments like what Mahesh or Lathika is doing, you know, we could partner, get in venture debt or debt kind of the point which was made earlier on the debt financing. Can we get more? So that's how we have to create a bit more of the ecosystem that will then take us to, and also a point about the family offices, how can we I think if we can create that ecosystem, get more and more partnerships leveraged, I think we are heading for to what we want to achieve in the future. It was more of a comment because I've seen how the venture investments have happened. We could create something in the impact investing space also.
Thank you.
One question to all of you. Single biggest piece of advice you have for entrepreneurs who you don't fund? What is the single biggest unlock you would ask of them, right? What would have changed your mind from going from a no to a yes? What is the most common thing? There's a question for each of you.
I'll summarize it for Mahesh. The question is that what is the piece of advice to entrepreneurs that you don't fund? So what, or in general, your piece of advice to entrepreneurs? So Lathika, Mahesh, would you want to take that question? And then if either one of you want to take the question on project financing.
I'll take it with an honesty that I've been an entrepreneur before. Then I became an investor. And I was an accidental entrepreneur. I'm an accidental investor. Both are accidents. But before I got one investment, I got 10 rejects from people saying no to me. Even as a funder, when I'm raising money for what we are trying to do, it's not that everybody accepts to do what we do. So I think the only thing is, I'm sure sometimes I will not get it. I want to understand what you're doing. But I'm definitely sure if you're clear about what you're creating out there, there'll be someone else who will come and take it. I think there's nothing else more advice than that, and it will happen.
Any thoughts on project financing?
So one thing is that if you don't get funded, you'll probably sleep better at night. So I've been an entrepreneur a couple of times around, and I must admit that I made more money when I didn't take money than when I actually raised money, right? So it isn't that you have to get funded to make, to grow your business. So that's something that you have to really, truly look at it. I think I got funded has become a tag that is cool. I think the reality is that are you able to have patience within your own business to say, you know what, I don't care if I'm not funded in the first 2 years. Let me grow at a pace, create value, whether it is, in the traditional sense in other traditional businesses or in the impact business, and if you truly need funding. Okay, so I don't think you should get dejected if you don't get funded, right? It really is, if you're basing your business only on getting through by getting funded, I think that's something that you need to question yourself. That's just a piece. From a project finance perspective, interestingly, I've been speaking to a bunch of banks. I think the banks are all coming out with various schemes in terms of helping, in terms of long-term cash flow, in terms of also, from what I understand, is that they do have preferential interest rates that they're giving, and if you're able to actually talk to them and show them what your 3-year plan is and why you need your project finance, I think that is now slowly coming in more and more into the country.
If I would just add to the last question on project financing, I do think the whole blended finance, which is the space of impact-linked financing, venture debt, impact-linked debt, concessional debt, is also a very fast evolving space in India. Asha Impact and IIC recently did a report, and it's 85 plus transactions which are just all linked to impact for project financing. It will be an amiss if I don't ask Supriya and Tanushree for their piece of advice on investors and how do you convert no's to yeses, and how do you take a no?
So exactly like Mahesh said, that I think you have to go through infinite number of investors to get one investor. Honestly, I think for me that was the biggest advice, because I think Steve Hardgrave, Vardhana, in 2017 we were a part of a village capital cohort, and we had no sight of being getting an investment. And I used to mail like 100 investors every month with the business update. And he said that and he was a celebrity founder, and he was like, how many mails did I write, or how many investors did I meet before my first round? And there was like 200 investors, and I was like, 100 is still half of it only. And therefore, I really can go to 100 more investors or maybe 200 more investors to get a yes. And you did. I mean, you do. So I think that really is very important. And continue to follow up and continue to kind of, yeah.
I think we all have the same view. So interestingly, like some of the ACT portfolio companies are here, and in the second half, we have these founder conversations. So Ashray and I were talking, and I was just joking that, none of them would want to meet me because they've already said no. So he's like, how about you give me a list of people who might want to meet you? I said, they'll just get annoyed and tell me not to come. But it's a process. But you do end up finding one or two people who you really connect with. And we've been fortunate to do that. I think, Prachi is here. MSDF is one of our backers. We have MDIF. We have Ankur Capital. We did reach out to 150 people to get these 3 people in. And that's the hard work that we as entrepreneurs will have to put in. But you do end up finding the right partner. So just be persistent, which is what all founders do anyway. So yeah.
From 150 to infinity, if that number is very encouraging for the social entrepreneurs. But I will say that, having been in this space, I do see the variety of capital increasing. It is not just a black and white boxed capital. I see more capital mixing. I see more innovative financing, which, in which I will put ACT actually at the front of that list emerging. So we all have reason to smile and keep doing the impact that we are doing, because there is capital available to help us achieve the missions that we individually have. Thank you so much, all of you, for engaging in this conversation, and you as well for participating and your questions, and keep doing the good work, the great work that all of you are doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prachi. I think obviously for leading this panel, but also just for being such an incredible partner to ACT overall. Thank you, Lathika, Supriya, Tanushree, Mahesh, for being so honest. I think it's hard to get these honest answers when we normally have these conversations. So thank you for a fabulous discussion.